Do you believe that in America there is still a town where almost all the residents have had to leave because the ground beneath has been burning since 1962? Or another place where only one resident remains but the local government is still maintained? Those stories that sound like horror movies are actually true. While most of the world remembers America for its peaceful suburbs and nostalgic small towns, there are still communities erased from the map by pollution, decay, natural disasters, or decades of isolation. The scariest part is not the legends, but the fact that all these places were once homes to thousands of ordinary families. In today's video, we will step into the 7 strangest towns in America to explore the real lives of those who once lived or still live there. And the first story will prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing is the success of the past. Let's get started. There is a fact that even many Americans have to pause for a few seconds to think about. At the height of World War II, the town of Pitcher, Oklahoma provided more than half of the lead used in the production of ammunition in the United States. It was once a symbol of industrial strength, stable employment, and the belief that with hard work, a small town could contribute to the nation's history. But many decades later, the very place that once helped America win is now considered one of the most polluted residential areas in the country. It sounds like a paradox, but it's a completely true story. If viewed from above, Pitcher does not resemble a ghost town. The first thing that catches the eye are the gigantic grayish-white hills, which from a distance look like snowdrifts left over from winter. The locals call them chat piles, mountains of waste from lead and zinc mining. The problem is they are neither snow nor sand. They contain heavy metal dust that can be dispersed by the wind, seep into water sources, and persist for many generations. There was a time when more than 34% of children here were recorded to have lead levels in their blood exceeding safe limits. In many places, children grow up with parks and playgrounds. In Pitcher, many children grow up next to mountains where a strong gust of wind can carry toxic dust throughout the neighborhood. That is the price that no economic growth statistics have ever noted in the footnotes. What is thought-provoking is that no one built Pitcher with the intention of creating a disaster. On the contrary, everything began with a very familiar American dream: resource extraction, job creation, feeding families, and community development. Thousands of workers flocked here, schools were built, churches were filled every weekend, and high school football games were once the pride of the entire town. But as the ore ran out, the companies gradually left, leaving behind empty tunnels, sinking land, and waste. Industry is like a generous guest at a party, but when it leaves the bill for those who remain to pay. Perhaps that is one of the most valuable lessons about the dark side of progress. Then, in 2008, an EF4 tornado swept through Pitcher, destroying most of what was left. After many years of efforts to address pollution and relocate residents, the town has almost disappeared from daily life. But what has been lost is not just homes. It is also the football field, where many generations used to cheer on Friday nights, the familiar diner, the church where families held weddings and Christmas celebrations. A community does not disappear just because people move away. It disappears when the collective memory has no place to return to. If you think stories like this deserve to be known by more people, please give it a like and subscribe. Numbers can sometimes be cold, but behind them are always the lives of very real people. And I also want to ask you one thing. If given the choice, would you stay to protect the place you call home, or would you leave knowing that very land is silently harming your family? However, no matter how terrifying Pitcher is, at least people know where the enemy lies. In the ground, in the lead dust, and in the old tunnels. As for the next town, it's different. The ground beneath it has been burning for over 6 decades. And scientists believe that the fire could last longer than the memories of many generations of Americans. Imagine a winter morning. You open the door and step out onto the porch. No sound of cars, no children going to school, no neighbors walking their dogs. Only thin white wisps of smoke rise from the cracks in the pavement, as if the earth itself is silently breathing. That's not a post-apocalyptic movie effect. That is Centralia, Pennsylvania, where an underground fire has been burning continuously since 1962 until today. The scariest thing about Centralia is not a big explosion that shakes the whole world. The frightening thing is that it is gradually losing bits and pieces, so slowly that an entire generation can grow up and grow old while the town continues to decay. Everything started with what seemed like a very ordinary garbage fire. But the fire accidentally ignited the coal seams deep underground, then silently spread through the old mine network. At first, many people believed that the fire would soon be brought under control. Then, mitigation measures were implemented, many options were tested, but over time, the scale of the fire exceeded practical control capabilities. In the end, the most feasible option was no longer to extinguish the fire, but to relocate the people. That might be the most heartbreaking moment. When an entire community has to accept that they cannot save their homeland, and the only option left is to leave it, the point that makes Centralia a strange symbol lies not in the fire, but in the speed of the disaster. It didn't come in a night like a storm or an earthquake. It came so slowly that people had time to hope, then to be disappointed, and then gradually got used to the fact that each year the town lost a few more houses, a few more streets, and a few more neighbors. At one point, the population dropped from over 1,000 people to just a few residents. Many roads have been closed, many houses have been dismantled, and smoke continues to rise from the ground. Experts estimate that the fire could last for another 250 years. This means that this fire could last longer than the buildings that once stood above it. In many places, it takes people a few months to repair a damaged road. In Centralia, there are roads that simply disappear from the map. What troubles many people is that there are still residents who refuse to leave for many years. It's not because they don't understand the level of danger, but because they understand something else very clearly. A home is not just four walls. It is where the children grew up, where wedding photos hang on the walls, where the whole family used to gather every Christmas season. When you tell someone to leave your house, sometimes you are also asking them to leave their own memories. Perhaps that's why Centralia doesn't resemble a ghost town. It resembles a photo album burning slowly, page by page, while the owner can only stand and watch. If you realize here that sometimes true stories can be more haunting than horror movies, please hit like to help the video reach more people, and subscribe if you enjoy the lesser-known aspects of America. I would also love to hear your opinion. If you knew that the place you live in could no longer be saved, would you stay for the memories or leave to start a new life? Please share in the comments. But Centralia still has one thing more pleasant than the next town. At least the people here can leave. But in the place we are about to go, life unfolds in a completely opposite way. Almost the entire town lives together in a single building, amidst the Alaskan ice and snow, where the door leading to the outside world can close every nightfall. If one day you wake up and realize that your apartment, your child's school, the post office, the grocery store, the laundry room, the mayor's office, the church, and even the neighbor you are trying to avoid are all in the same building, will you feel that it is a convenience or a huge cage? Sounds like the idea of a science fiction movie, but in Whittier, Alaska, that's everyday life. With a population of just over 200 people, most residents live in Begich Towers, a building originally constructed for military purposes, but now has become almost the entire town in miniature. What is frightening about Whittier is not the crime rate, which is very low, but the feeling that you almost never truly leave your community. At first glance, life here sounds quite appealing. Snowstorm? No problem. You can take your child to school, pick up the mail, buy groceries, or see the doctor without having to step outside. In the midst of an Alaskan winter with snowfall exceeding 250 inches per year, that's no small advantage. But then you start to realize the price you have to pay for that convenience. In many big cities, you might not know the name of the person living next door for many years. In Whittier, neighbors might know what you cooked last night, because the smell of food sometimes spreads faster than gossip. People often say that small communities are very close-knit. That's right. But when all relationships take place within a few floors, the distance between connection and suffocation is sometimes just one elevator ride apart. The most special aspect lies in the location of Whittier. The town is surrounded by mountains, ice, and sea. The main connection to the outside is the Anton Anderson Tunnel, a mountain tunnel that operates on a specific schedule and closes at night. That means if you miss the tunnel hours, your only option is to wait until the next morning. No one intentionally designed this place to be scary. It's simply the result of the terrain and climate. But that very isolation creates a very unique psychological pressure. People always feel reassured knowing they can leave at any time. Whittier is different. Even if you have no intention of going anywhere, knowing that you cannot leave creates an indescribable feeling, like a door that is always locked, even though you have no desire to open it. However, it would not be fair to view Whittier solely through a dark lens. Because of the harsh living conditions, the people here rely on each other more than most other communities in the United States. They know each other, help each other, and get through the long winters together. That is the beautiful side of a small community. But it is also that very thing that makes every conflict, every rumor, and every silence have no place to disappear. Some people used to joke, in Los Angeles, neighbors don't know who you are. In Whittier, they even know when you take out the trash. It sounds funny, but it also makes you understand how precious privacy is here. If you also enjoy exploring strange yet very real places like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to join the channel. And I'm also curious to know, are you willing to trade privacy for a sense of safety and a community that is always by your side? Or just a week living in baggage towers and you'd want set an alarm for the tunnel opening hours? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. But if Whittier makes people feel suffocated because everyone lives too close together, the next town is frightening in a completely opposite way. There are almost no people left there, but what remains still makes anyone who steps in feel not at all lonely. There is a very difficult paradox to explain in America. If a city were to be established right where the two largest rivers in the Midwest meet, most of us would think that it would eventually become a bustling commercial center. And for many years, Cairo, Illinois, truly was that way. Located at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, Cairo was once considered a rare strategic position, where boats, goods, and opportunities converged. But today, standing among the old brick buildings with closed windows and nearly deserted streets, you will realize a harsh truth. A perfect geographical location is not always enough to save a city. Sometimes, what causes a place to disappear is not a natural disaster or a curse, but decades of decisions piling up. At the beginning of the 20th century, Cairo had about 15,000 residents and was once likened to Little Chicago of southern Illinois. The bustling ports, hotels, shops, and vibrant neighborhoods made people believe that the future of this city was almost guaranteed. But then the economy changed, transport routes shifted, and businesses gradually left. At the same time, prolonged racial tensions and various social issues have gradually eroded the trust between the community and investment activities. When jobs disappear, young people also leave. When young people leave, schools, shops, and services gradually shrink. It's a very familiar downward spiral, but once it starts, it almost feeds on itself. The point that makes Cairo haunting is not the abandoned houses, but the question, how could a city that once had every advantage end up here? Currently, the population is only about 1,700 people, many houses are abandoned, and real estate prices have dropped significantly. But a low price does not mean an opportunity. A house may be cheaper than an old car, but if there are no jobs, no stores, no medical services, and fewer neighbors around, what you are buying is not just a house. You are also buying isolation. Someone once bitterly said, "When a house is so cheap that no one wants to buy it, it's no longer a bargain." That is a warning. It sounds funny, but behind that statement lies a reality that is not easy to face. The saddest thing is that Cairo didn't die in a day. It's like an old clock winding down. Every year, a few more shops, a few more families, a few more classrooms are lost. At some point, people no longer recognize the noise that once gave life to the city. The old mansions still stand there. The roads still lead to the riverbank. But it feels as if time has decided to stop while the rest of America continues to move forward. Perhaps that's why Cairo doesn't resemble a ghost town. It resembles an old, faded photograph where all the characters have stepped out of the frame. I also want to ask you a question. In your opinion, what is more dangerous for a community? Losing jobs, losing trust, or losing the younger generation? Please share your perspective in the comments, as each opinion makes the discussion more interesting. But no matter how quiet Cairo is, there are still streets here, still families trying to hold on. The next town is much stranger. It has only one resident left, but somehow, It still has a mayor, still has a library, still has a bar, and is still called a town of America. There is a saying that in most places would sound like bragging, "I run this whole town." But in Minowi, Nebraska, that's simply a job description, because there is only one resident left. Mrs. Elsie Eiler is not only the mayor, but also manages the library, runs the bar, signs administrative documents, and even pays taxes for her own town. It sounds like a funny story on the internet, but upon closer inspection, Minowi is no joke. It resembles a mirror reflecting what is quietly happening in many rural areas of America. Communities are not disappearing due to disaster, but due to time. If we only look at the numbers, Minowi might be the perfect place. The unemployment rate is almost meaningless. The voter turnout rate reached 100%, as there was only one voter. No traffic jams, no arguments about parking spaces, and no neighbors playing music at midnight. Sounds quite peaceful, doesn't it? But that tranquility comes from another reality. There aren't many people left to create the noise of life. In large cities, people often complain about being too crowded. In Minowi, if Elsie oversleeps one morning, the whole town might just take a break too. That's the kind of humor that makes people smile, only to feel a lump in their throat right after. What is worth pondering is that Minowi is not an isolated case. For decades, a multitude of small towns across the American Midwest have witnessed young people leaving to find jobs in larger cities. When schools have fewer students, small businesses close, agriculture becomes increasingly mechanized, and job opportunities shrink. That cycle keeps repeating. The young leave first, the old stay behind. Then one day, the streets are still there, but the laughter of children is not. Minowi is just the most extreme example of a trend that has been quietly unfolding for many years. It is not haunted. It is covered by the void of time. What moves many people is that Mrs. Elsie did not continue to stay out of obligation. She stayed for the memories. The small bar still opens to serve the rare customers who stop by. The library is still carefully maintained because it is the collection of books that her late husband dedicated his entire life to building. It feels as if every morning she not only opens the shop, but also opens the door for a once bustling town to return in memory. One can still keep a place on the map, but can one person keep the soul of an entire community forever? Sometimes the smallest towns tell the biggest stories about America. And I also want to ask you, if you had the chance to live in a place as absolutely quiet as Minowi, would you consider it paradise or the greatest loneliness? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. But Minowi leaves people speechless because only one person remains. The next town, on the other hand, leaves all of America puzzled for an entirely different reason. Too many people have left, or disappeared, and to this day, there is no explanation that everyone agrees on. A person left the house in the afternoon. That person said they would be back before dark. But then night fell. No calls, no new footprints, no phone signal, no bodies were found. Only a blank space remains in the family's memory. In most places, it is a rare tragedy. But in Nome, Alaska, such stories have repeated enough times to make people start asking difficult questions. What makes Nome haunting is not the legends or the mystery movies inspired by this place. What is much more terrifying is that the nature here is harsh enough to make people disappear without any supernatural forces appearing. Nome is located on the Bering Sea coast, with a population of only about 3,500 to 3,600 people. What is special about this town is that there are no roads connecting it to the rest of Alaska. To get here, you can only travel by plane or by seasonal sea routes. As soon as you set foot in Nome, you will understand what it truly feels like to be at the end of the world. The low sky, the cold wind whipping across your face, the snow covering the horizon, and the profound silence so intense that sometimes you can hear your own footsteps. In big cities, we often worry if our Uber is a few minutes late. In Nome, if you stray from the familiar route, the first thing to find you might not be a rescue team, but a snowstorm. That is also the reason why each disappearance in Nome becomes a race against time. From the 1960s to the early 2000s, this area recorded at least over 24 unresolved disappearances. Each case has its own circumstances, and it would not be accurate to lump them all into a single cause. But there is a very clear common point. The terrain is too vast, the weather changes too quickly, and the distance is too great, making the search efforts extremely difficult. Just one wrong turn, a thick layer of fog, or a drop in temperature over a few hours, and all traces can quickly be wiped away by snow and wind. Nature in Nome is not angry. It is just completely indifferent. And sometimes that indifference is even scarier than anything else. What makes the story even more heart-wrenching is the feeling of having no resolution. For many families, the pain lies not only in losing a loved one, but also in never knowing what really happened. There is no place to mourn, no answer certain enough to close the past. Only the empty chairs at dinner remain, along with the faint hope that one day there might be news. It is the kind of silent suffering that is very difficult to express in statistics. Perhaps that's why Nome doesn't resemble a horror town. It resembles a land that always reminds people that, before nature, we are much smaller than we often think. However, it is that harsh life that has created a special community. The people of Nome have a habit of informing their loved ones where they are going, carrying communication devices whenever possible, and always keeping an eye on each other. Not because they live in fear, but because they understand that nature here does not allow for complacency. Do you think the scariest places are always those with many legends? Or sometimes nature itself is the most formidable antagonist? Please share your thoughts in the comments. But if Nome makes people disappear in the silence of the white snow, then the town in the #1 position makes all of America talk for a completely different reason. It wasn't nature that drove the people away. It was the people themselves who left, and the voids they left behind nurtured one of the most famous urban legends in the United States. The road is blocked by a barrier. The abandoned houses stand silent among the trees. An old church with no congregation. Warning signs appear in what should be a normal residential area. If you come across that scene without knowing what happened, what would be the first thing that comes to your mind? A disaster? A secret? Or a horror movie? That is Helltown, Ohio. A name that sounds like it was made up by Hollywood, but it actually comes from a very real story. What makes Helltown the scariest town on this list is not the evidence of the supernatural, but the gap between what is known and what is not fully explained that has given rise to countless legends. In the 1970s, the area belonging to Boston Township was reclaimed by the government to facilitate the expansion of the national park system. Many families moved away, many houses were left behind, and then gradually demolished. On paper, this is a planning decision with a clear objective. But in reality, when people see the blocked roads, the abandoned constructions, and very little information being conveyed to the public in an understandable way, their imagination begins to fill those gaps. Thus, stories about mysterious cults, ghost buses, chemicals, strange creatures, and other conspiracy theories began to emerge one after another. Perhaps the most interesting lesson here is, when information is lacking, rumors always work very hard. What is noteworthy is that Helltown not only reflects how a place becomes legendary, but also how people handle uncertainty. We often fear what we do not understand more than what we know well. If a place is closed, houses are left abandoned, warning signs appear in the forest, and the answer is only summarized in a few short lines, then the imagination will almost certainly start to fill in the missing parts. Someone once joked, if you close down an entire town, put up a few warning signs and say, "There's nothing here," then congratulations, you've just hired the entire internet as a free horror movie screenwriter. It sounds funny, but that's also how many urban legends are formed. What makes me think the most is the perspective of those who once lived here. For tourists, Helltown is a place to hunt for photos and tell spooky stories. But for the families who once had to leave their homes, it is simply a community that is no longer the same. Perhaps sometimes, the greatest curse does not lie in the forest or the abandoned houses, but in the feeling of a town that once had laughter, neighbors, and weekend parties. And then gradually only silence remains. In your opinion, what is scarier, an uncomfortable truth or a void that everyone fills with their own imagined answer? Leave a comment below. The 7 towns we have just explored may differ greatly in location, history, and circumstances, but they all share one common story. The scariest thing is not always the legends or rumors. Sometimes, it is the consequence of time, nature, economic upheavals, and communities that were once vibrant but have gradually been left behind. They remind us that behind every deserted street, every abandoned house, or every nearly vanished town, there was once life, memories, and the homeland of many people. In your opinion, which town impresses or haunts you the most? If given the chance, would you dare to visit one of these places? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to read everyone's different perspectives. If you enjoy videos exploring the lesser-known aspects of America, from economics and society to history, and the stories behind the numbers, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. The video content is compiled from historical documents, public data, and local legends and folktales. Some details reflect the beliefs or narratives of the community and are presented with the purpose of exploring and analyzing cultural and historical aspects, not to assert them as absolute truths. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.